Right, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the Players 2 podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find Players 2 on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, the lot. You can also find our written content over at players2.com, that's players2.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, that would be really helpful to us. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could give us a little review as well, it doesn't have to be a huge diatribe, just a little thumbs up is good enough for us. Again, it really does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. So if you like anything you hear here, please take 5 seconds to do that. Hashtag 5 seconds, 5 stars. I'm still trying, Liz. I'm still trying. All right, on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going well, Mark. It's good to be back in Glasgow after a long month of not really being here very much. So yeah, I'm ready to be playing some video games and talking about some video games yet again.
Awesome, man. So what have you been up to this week?
Well, I haven't been playing any video games this week because, yeah.
Useful for having a video games podcast.
Yeah, it's been an absolutely crazy month of work and I have not had a day off in over 3 weeks now, so yeah, it's been tough, but here we are. And the one thing that I have been doing is reading about video games. I've been reading a book called Lost in a Good Game by Dr. Pete Etchells, who is a psychologist and science writer based at Bath Spa University down in England. And the book is kind of about the science and psychology and the study around some of the big issues that we've been talking about on the show over the last few weeks, around addiction and around loot boxes and video game violence and that kind of thing. Yeah, we were really fortunate to interview him at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and that interview is our topic of the week this week, so stay tuned for that. Mark, what have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, it's been almost exclusively Fire Emblem. I am now 68 hours into the game, according to the in-game timer, although in reality, I'll leave it kind of paused and bug off to do things for like an hour at a time occasionally, so we're probably looking in more at the realm of 60-ish hours. Just got to the halfway point.
Seriously?
It's not really the halfway point, but it's not really a spoiler to say. It's kind of common knowledge about this game that there's a kind of time skip in the game, so I've now got to the time skip. If anyone's put off by the amount of time that it's taken me to get to that point, please don't be. I'm playing this game way more thoroughly than is even remotely reasonable, I would say. Yeah, I'm still really, really loving it, actually. I'm not mad keen on the path I've chose, actually,
really?
Which makes me want to replay it even more.
And what's it? What in terms of the house that you picked, or
Not well. I don't know. I kind of thought that I picked the best house, but then that might not be true.
What do you mean best house?
I don't know. I just thought that I picked the one that I thought was going to go down a path that I wanted to happen, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But whereas I'm feeling a bit slightly apprehensive about my decisions, or what some of my decisions have led to, because I didn't necessarily think that they were going to lead to where they have done. So it's interesting. I'm still feeling good about it. No spoilers at all. No spoilers at all here.
Can't wait to get off here and ask you what the hell's been going on.
No, it's been good, man, though. It has been legitimately interesting. Some of the decisions have been real decisions that I'm kind of like, oh God, what do I want to do here? You know what I mean?
It feels like it is actually branching then when you're making decisions like that.
Oh yeah, and I think that the Black Eagle has 2 branches within it. No, sorry, there's 3 branches within the Black Eagle, and there's only 2 within the other ones.
Right.
I think. Please, I could very much be wrong. Still in the first playthrough. Bear with me here. It's going to take another 68 hours to do the next one. So, no, actually, I think there's a New Game Plus, which allows you to skip some stuff, which nice. I'm like, sweet, let's do that.
So, see the way you've been playing this kind of overly thorough way, you don't have to play it like that.
Oh, God, no. Right, no, okay. It really is. I've kind of got like a bit obsessive compulsive about it all. Okay. It really absolutely does not have to be played the way that I'm playing it. In fact, I would almost recommend not playing it the way that I played it. But yeah, I'm not really a completionist in the sense, like, I have to 100% the game. Like, I don't need to go out and get platinums, but even in games like God of War and things like that, I was checking in like every single little corner in case there was something that I could pick up or find, or some chest. And the thing is that in Fire Emblem, it drops you in the same place to do that all the time, and it's big, and I go around like every single corner all the time, even ones that I know that there won't be stuff, just in case there is.
That's crazy, man.
I've got a fucking problem, mate. I've got a serious problem. Anyway, long story short, the game's great though. One thing I will say about it though is that I'm pretty overpowered. Like, I'm quite seriously overpowered.
Yeah.
And it's become, although I haven't said that, the last mission was more difficult since the time skip, but it was getting there at a point where I was kind of one-shotting basically everything.
Wow.
And it wasn't great. It was more about how to position my characters that I want to get more XP to get the kills. Like that was the I mean, there's still strategy in it. It's kind of weird. There's still
but
like
it's not just winning the battle strategy.
No, winning the battle is never in doubt. Essentially, like my main character is basically a god. It's like she is murdering everyone just by giving them a strong stare. They just fall down dead. I would highly recommend, and if I get the option on a New Game Plus, I will definitely be playing it on hard without a doubt, because the permadeath mechanic is just inconsequential, because there's no chance really that anyone is going to die, and even if they do, I have so many of these rind mechanics they're called divine pulses, and I've got so many of them now. I've got like 11 of them that they would need to die 11 times for me to lose a character, and it's just like, this is never ever going to happen. It's just never going to happen. So if you do buy this game, I would highly recommend, one, not being intimidated by playing in classic mode, which is permadeath, and two, not being intimidated by playing it on hard, because I think, quite honestly, you're probably going to get a better experience, particularly if you're familiar with Fire Emblem games and games of this type.
Interesting.
And apparently there's going to be a new difficulty coming out as well, like a nightmare mode or whatever.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
So,
unlikely.
We can go too far in the other direction, you know what I mean? But we'll see how it pans out. Okay, on to the news. All right, news item number 1. There isn't a whole lot of news, which is good, because we've got our awesome interview with Pete Etchells, and if it's going to happen in a week where there's no news, that's great. That's less editing for Mark. Anyway, so news item number 1. This is just such a stupid thing, but it's absolutely everywhere just now. So I think we would be remiss if we never talked about it, even though basically neither of us want to talk about this. So there's a game called Ion Fury, which used to be called Ion Maiden before they got sued by Iron Maiden for being too close to Iron Maiden. So immediately started out not on the great foot. To be honest with you, the game in itself seems to be quite a good game. It's a kind of throwback 90s shooter. It's even built in an old 90s engine, like it's built in an old modified Quake engine, I think.
Yeah, it's supposed to something like that. Duke Nukem. It's all kind of
Duke Nukem. Thank you. Yes, that's right. It seems to have brought the 90s into 2019 as well, unfortunately, because some of the dev team have been accused of, and in fact it's factually happened because there's screenshots of it, have been accused of making sexist and transphobic and homophobic comments in their Discord chat. And that included quite a few senior members of the team, including, I think, one of the kind of lead designers, which, yeah, obviously all that was bad. This was kind of coupled with the fact that in their game, there was a kind of secret area whereby you could see the word fag bag as well. There's a bottle of like hand cream, which is supposed to be like a spin on Olay, the bathroom brand. I don't really know what they are. What would you call them? There. Yeah, cosmetic brand. I guess that would count. Yeah. But instead of calling it Olay, they've decided to call it O-Gay. Which, I mean,
isn't that hilarious?
I know. It's just. Do you know what the thing is?
Watch me cackle.
Do you know what the thing is? Do you know what the thing is? Right? Is that, see with all this? See the O-Gay thing? Right. That is a joke, I would say, in poor taste. I don't think anyone is particularly clutching their pearls and going, oh my God, I'm so unbelievably offended by your O-Gay call. Because quite frankly, I think that's given this game too much credence and too much importance to think anyone would care enough about this little game. Nonetheless, it was brought up. However, having fag bag and I think it was in a secret room that you weren't supposed to be able to access in the first place. But I mean, if someone in your dev team's writing stuff like that, I mean, it's not a great sign.
Why are they even doing it?
Exactly. And then that coupled with all this stuff that they were saying on their official Discord for Ion Fury, it was just like, right, this is painting a real bad picture real quickly. So subsequently, when all this was discovered and there was a bit of stink kicked up about it, subsequently Voidpoints, who are the dev team behind Ion Fury, made this statement.
Members of Voidpoint's Ion Fury team have made sexist and transphobic comments and included homophobic language in Ion Fury. We recognise these statements are insensitive, unacceptable and counterproductive to cases of equality. We unequivocally apologise both for these comments and language as well as for any pain they've caused the gaming community, particularly women and members of the LGBTQ community. We take full responsibility for any damage that's been done to the relationships we've worked so hard to build. Moving forward, Voidpoint will institute a zero-tolerance policy for this type of language, and all employees and contractors will undergo mandatory sensitivity training. As part of our efforts to contribute to the work that must be done to further support these communities, we are donating $10,000 from Ion Fury's release day proceeds to the Trevor Project. We are also patching Ion Fury ASAP to remove all unacceptable language.
And also, publisher 3D Realms made a statement as well.
It has come to our attention, Voidpoint, the developers of Ion Fury, have been accused of making transphobic and misogynistic statements. Under current leadership, 3D Realms has taken pride in empowering marginalised groups, as evidenced by our strong female protagonist Shelley Bombshell Harrison and the makeup of our team. Moving forward, all of 3D Realms' contracts will include terms which would allow us to sever a relationship if a contractor does not abide by our zero tolerance policy for hate speech.
Now, you've made a dumb joke in your game, the old gay thing. Right, fine. Take it out. It was a dumb mistake. Shouldn't have been in there in the first place, but basically, you made an apology, you're making a donation to LGBTQ charity, a quite sizable donation. Fair play to you. This was bad, you done the right thing. However, this sadly is not the end of this story, because this resulted in a certain sect of the gaming community, and I think we all know what sect that is, review bombing the game on Steam, review bombing Ion Fury on Steam, which resulted from its overall reviews going from very positive to mostly positive, and from its recent reviews going from mostly positive to mixed. I think this happened over a couple of days, basically, and just in the most unbelievable turn of heel I think I've ever seen in my life, Voidpoint then released this statement from them and 3D Realms.
We've caused a recent controversy suggesting the Ion Fury game content was to be censored. We will absolutely not be censoring Ion Fury or any of our other games, now or in the future, including but not limited to by removing gags such as gaming's most controversial facial wash. We do not support censorship of creative works of any kind and regret our initial decision to alter a sprite in the game instead of trusting our instincts. 3D Realms and Voidpoint stand together on this matter. Last but not least, please respect our need to keep our community forums clean from hateful messages, spam or off-topic threads. We recognise our mistake and have received your message loud and clear.
And subsequently, 3D Realms also made a statement, and Lewis, if you could read that as well.
The use of the word fagbag in an area that was inaccessible without hacking the game and was added by one of our developers without approval from anyone else was removed a few days ago. We once again apologise for this text as it does not reflect the values of 3D Realms or Voidpoint. Jokes at the expense of marginalised communities will not be present in future games published by 3D Realms. However, a portion of our community made it loud and clear they felt removing "oh gay" was censorship and should be protected by free speech. Voidpoint wanted to listen and we respected this decision.
I mean, it's utterly pathetic, isn't it?
Pathetic is 100% the right word for that. It is utterly, utterly pathetic.
I mean, I actually don't want to spend too much time on this. Quite frankly, I think we've given this more fucking oxygen than it deserves. But to go from acknowledging in a statement that your language that you used in your games was homophobic, was transphobic, was sexist, like I believe that they said that in their statement. And 3D Realms also said that like they take full responsibility for this and blah 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 blah. And it just makes that donation, which they are still doing the donation. They did make that clear as well. So they are still making a donation to this LGBTQ charity, the Trevor Project. It just totally taints that. It just shows that it wasn't in good faith. It had nothing to do with that. It wasn't to do with they supported that. They simply done that to get on the right side.
Yeah, to get out of trouble, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, to get out of trouble. Then, as they admit, a portion of their audience then got very vocal on Steam and started review bombing them. And Steam are supposed to have systems in place to stop review bombings from happening, and have said as much that they have systems in place. However, there was absolutely nothing done about this. But because their community got so vocal, or because a portion of their community rather got so vocal, they just totally flip-flopped again. It was just this company, 3D Realms and Voidpoints, obviously have absolutely zero fucking integrity. They are clearly just doing whatever they need to do to get their game bought and their review scores looking good.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. Like this is clearly what they're doing. They've basically said as much.
Yeah,
they've said that we should have trusted our gut, blah blah blah, which basically meant that the first statement was just garbage. Was just utterly garbage. Was simply lying. Actually,
absolutely,
was just simply lying.
And if they did mean it, then removing that stuff isn't censorship because it's their game and they can do whatever they want with their creative endeavor. So if they decided that the thing that was in it was wrong,
also worth pointing out that they did take out the fag bag thing. So I mean, technically, was that censorship?
Yeah.
Have they censorship then to me? And I don't think it was like oh my god, this is so unbelievably offensive, but it is a bit insensitive, and it's just a bit detractive for no reason.
Exactly, it just doesn't need to be there. You know, you can have your jokes, you can have South Park style humour or whatever, and you can not just...
Oh, let's not drag South Park down to that fucking level. Holy shit, I
absolutely
think
not,
they're doing it a bit better than this.
Yeah, totally.
At least understand the concept of satire.
Yeah, but like that kind of, you know, edgy for edgy's sake, like that's fine, and they can kind of ape Duke Nukem and do that kind of stuff, but you don't need to just put in random stuff like this. And it's just like not helping anyone. It's no use. I really think that they've completely probably blown this now, because
I mean,
people on both sides of that culture divide are just...
I don't know anyone that would ever hire these people ever again. Do you know what I mean? I hope you get some fucking success out of this Iron Fury game, because I think that your career could very well be done because of this hill that you've chose to die on for no reason.
Well, I think that the game can't do well, basically, because the people who were angry at them for censoring it in the first place are probably still going to be against it. And me and you,
I was actually going to bring this up
either. So
one of the saddest things about this is that it did kind of work, because their overall reviews have went up to very positive again, and their last 30-day reviews have went up to mostly positive.
But is that people buying the game though, or is that people just posting things because
I'm not really sure how. I don't really know how Steam reviews work. You may have had to have bought the game to have be able to review it, but I don't know enough about Steam, quite frankly, to be able to do that. But
it's a mess.
Yeah, it is. It's just absolutely ridiculous that someone's taking this stance in this day and age. And I think that Void Points and 3D Realms have proven themselves utterly cowardly and spineless, and thinking that pandering to the free speech evangelists and people who have nothing better to do than go and review bomb their game is a better use of their time than having some fucking integrity and some fucking principles, and actually standing for something and not being detractive and actually helping out people and showing that you want to be for equality and not distract from that, which is all they've done. All right, and news item number 2. This is hopefully a bit more cheery, or I think so anyway. PlayStation have bought Insomniac Games. Now, we did mention this on the last podcast on the Gamescom special, which because it was actually announced by Jeff Keighley on the Gamescom opening night live stage, which was quite a cool way to find out, actually. I just wanted to kind of talk about it just a wee bit more, just because I actually do think this is a really big deal, and we never really got much of a chance to talk about it last week. And again, quite frankly, a bit of a slow news week. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's really cool. It felt a little bit like it was in the works. There's been some rumblings for a while.
I mean, it felt like a long time coming. Honestly.
Yeah, but it seems like a smart move. We've seen that Microsoft or Xbox are buying up a lot of studios and bringing a lot of things in-house. And Sony, it felt to me that Sony needed to do something about that. Insomniac, they've had a really strong relationship with in the past. They've got some great IP on PlayStation over the years from Insomniac. Am I right in saying that Spider-Man is now the biggest selling PS4 exclusive? And so, like, that's obviously that's got a large part to do with the Spider-Man IP and not necessarily just Insomniac, but bringing all of that in, making sure you've got that lockdown for years to come is very important.
You seem to be implying that this was in direct response to what Xbox was doing. Is that how you kind of feel?
Not like in direct response, but I think that there's a mood probably right now in the industry, which is that with things like Stadia and that on the horizon, the big three, or certainly Xbox and PlayStation, need to start thinking of themselves less as kind of hardware manufacturers and exclusive creators, but more as kind of publishing wings, and they need to bring other studios in-house and put more out and have more under their kind of wheelhouse. And it seemed like Xbox were just doing that rapidly and getting some really exciting stuff there, and Sony have been a little bit slower with it, but they were so close in the beginning anyway, you know, them and Insomniac. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't necessarily think that it's a direct response to Xbox. I think the writing was on the wall for this for quite a while. Yeah. Spider-Man is actually the second highest selling PlayStation game, behind Uncharted 4. It sold 13.2 million copies, and Uncharted 4's sold 15 million copies. So that's going to get eaten up in no time at all. Yeah, I think it's really good for PlayStation. I think it's probably really good for Insomniac as well, in reality. I think that this was probably an inevitability more than anything else, that they've been close for a long time. I know that Insomniac went off and done
Sunset Overdrive,
thank you, for Xbox, but in reality they've been mostly affiliated with PlayStation. They were heavily involved, or were they the main devs on Ratchet and Clank?
Yeah.
So,
and Resistance, right? That was theirs, Resistance Fall of Man.
Yeah, exactly. So they've been heavily affiliated with PlayStation for a long time. So I think this makes a lot of sense. I suppose what I wanted to ask was, do you think that this is going to lead to more acquisitions by PlayStation? Do you think PlayStation have to be making more moves to keep up with Xbox, or do you think they're quite content with what they've got? Because I mean, what they've got is pretty damn good, let's be honest.
Well, exactly, you know what I mean? Yeah. Sony's first party studios are pretty top drawer, and I don't think that they will move too quickly on anything else. I get the feeling that Sony are making smart investments, they're not making panicky investments.
Do you think that's what Xbox are doing?
A little bit. I'm not saying.
I don't think it's panicky, but I understand what you're saying. That there's a necessity there for Xbox, whereas there isn't for PlayStation.
And I think,
you know?
I still think Xbox is making good acquisitions. It's not like,
absolutely.
It's not like they're buying
Obsidian and Ninja Theory alone. They've knocked out of the park there.
They're not panicking in that they are just buying up anyone, but it's the pace that they have done that suggests that someone behind the scenes is going, we need to make some games for this bloody system. So
and I mean, fair play.
Yeah.
Good,
whereas
good
like Sony has just got things ticking along, and we know obviously with things like Kojima Productions, they've got this whole kind of slew of like almost like second party games where they've got developers who are working exclusively with them but aren't owned by them, and so it's just kind of they're in a good spot just now, and I think just making smart investments like they've done here is probably their way forward.
Well, two in particular that jump out to me is Kojima Productions and Atlas. Both of them are quote second party, I suppose. Atlas made the Persona series and the Shin Megami Tensei series, which aren't necessarily massive in this country, but are much bigger in America and absolutely gigantic in Japan. I could very easily see them being purchased, although I do think that they're kind of split PlayStation Nintendo these days. And Kojima Productions, I think that if Death Stranding is a big hit, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, I think Sony would be daft not to at least inquire.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether they were open to that. I mean, Kojima could easily go off with himself and do what he wants to do. You know what I mean? He's big enough. Another one that I was thinking about as well was Supermassive Games, which do Until Dawn and are more recently going to be very shortly releasing the
Dark Pictures
anthology. No, but what's the new
Man of Medan? Yeah.
That was it. Yes, but before this anthology that they seem to be doing, this Dark Pictures anthology, which will be coming to both Xbox and PlayStation. They were very heavily PlayStation affiliated, and Bluepoint actually as well. Of course.
Our old favourites.
Yeah, famous for always like an E3 prediction. Like, what game could they possibly be remaking? No, but again, they've been heavily affiliated with PlayStation, even going way back. But particularly because of that Shadow of the Colossus remake, which was just outstandingly good. And I think that they worked on, I think it was the Ico remaster or the Ico Shadow of the Colossus. Bringing over to the new consoles or whatever it was as well. Like they've definitely worked on other things for PlayStation as well. The final one that I was thinking about was Remedy Games as well, who are kind of one of the few big independent studios left. They've just released Control, which we'll come on to very shortly. But do you think there's any chance to be an independent developer of that sort of size today, or are you just destined to be gobbled up?
I'm not sure destined to be gobbled up is the thing. Like I suspect if you're a studio of that kind of size, there's blood in the water. You know, the big studios are going to be looking at you and at least tying you up into these kind of semi-exclusive deals. But I think if Control does well for Remedy, they're not going to financially need to get into bed with Sony specifically. But it might just make sense for them to do that.
I think it would be very difficult for studios of any size to turn down the kind of money that. Whether it be Microsoft, whether it be Sony, whether it be someone like EA or Bethesda or some of these other big publishers, the kind of money that they're batting around.
Exactly, yeah.
They would be financially foolish to turn away that money. You just would be, as a purely business decision, the amount of money that they can offer you, you might never see again in your life. So yeah, difficult, interesting. There seems to be fewer and fewer independent studios out there beyond the kind of very small indie studios that are. Yeah, they just seem to be going quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker, and somebody's going to snap you up, it seems, if you make anything worth a damn. All right, as we mentioned, Remedy Games have released Control. Whoa! This is something that me and Lewis, I think it's safe to say that we've both been looking forward to since we saw that trailer at E3 2018, totally out of the blue, and all of a sudden I was like, bang, that looks like something for me. And I've been following it really closely ever since, and basically it continues to look like something for me, and I'm very, very much looking forward to getting my hands on a copy. I've kind of told myself that I'm going to finish Fire Emblem first. We'll see how that pans out, but that is the current plan. Right now on Metacritic, never be a slave to Metacritic, always remember, but currently on Metacritic it's got an 81 for PS4, an 84 for Xbox, and a 85 for PC. So right in that damn good game range,
mid eights. That's pretty good stuff for a game like this, I would say. We were both kind of predicted it would be roughly that when we were talking about it last week. So yeah, my big reintroduction to games this week, now that I'm finished work, is going to be Control. I've ordered a copy. It should be here.
Oh yeah, have you? Nice one, man. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's
slightly jealous you're going to get to play before me, but that's pretty good.
And I'm going to have a whole day off to do it. So,
nice man. Nice one. Well, the thing is that the campaign isn't mad long.
No.
So you might be able to tank it in that one day.
Well, I was thinking that, and if I do, that would be ideal.
That'd be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I'll take it off you, man. Seriously,
cool.
I would quite literally buy it off you if you do that.
But yeah, so we should have some thoughts on it in next week's show. As we record this, it's released today, I believe, right? So
that's correct. Yeah.
So there's not been an opportunity yet, but definitely some early thoughts next week, or possibly full game thoughts, depending on how sure the narrative is.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. I was mad hyped for it beforehand, and yeah, can't wait to play it. But just got to finish that Fire Emblem first. And
you'll never finish that.
I'm going to fucking finish it. Shut up. Another game being released this week was Astral Chain. This from Platinum Games and the creators of Nier Automata, Bayonetta, and Devil May Cry 5, or just the Devil May Cry series in general. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, that is a holy trinity of that sort of game if you've ever heard it. So yeah, it's a typical Platinum Games game, very stylized combat in the vein of Devil May Cry / Bayonetta, and the fact that someone from Nier Automata is involved in this, one of my favourite games from, God, what was that, 2 years ago now? Absolutely awesome game. Totally loved it. Very, very excited to get my hands on this as well. Again, this was shown on a Nintendo Direct a wee while back, probably last year.
I think it was the E3 Direct last year, wasn't it?
Was it the E3 Direct last year?
Could be wrong, but yeah.
I get the sense it was closer to Christmas. Again, I could also be totally wrong about that. But again, it totally came out of the blue, and then suddenly these big names from these big franchises were connected with it, and I was like, bang, I am in again, 100%. And again, it's reviewed really well. It's currently sitting at an 88 on Metacritic. Never be a slave to the Metacritic, but yeah, man, looks great.
It doesn't feel like my type of game necessarily.
It really, really, really doesn't.
No, but again,
Liz Camley, I know you. I've known you for far too long, some would say. Yeah. It doesn't strike me as something that you would be overly interested in.
No, there's things about it that I think look quite interesting, but it's definitely the sort of thing that I'll just watch you play a bit, and then if it moves me, I'll maybe pay more attention. But yeah, I think if you're big into Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, maybe less so Nier Automata to a certain extent, this looks like a game for you. Yeah. But
it's that sort of stylized combat, but I think it's more arcadey in the vein of Bayonetta and Devil May Cry as opposed to Nier Automata. Yeah. But a game that you are interested in is Telling Lies.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is the new game from Sam Barlow, who was the creator of Her Story, and like that game, it's a kind of a spiritual successor to that game, which plays out just all in a kind of like fake desktop, and you play as a character. It's
like fake found footage.
Yeah, and it's kind of all like FMV stuff. Like, it's a weird interactive game, but you are essentially trying to piece together a kind of a mystery about, some sort of case that's gone wrong or whatever. And yeah, like the previous game, it's got really interesting gameplay mechanics and just this totally unusual style. I'm really excited to get playing it. I've actually not played Her Story yet either, but it's been like on top of my list for so long.
Me neither, man. I was just about to say, it's actually on my desktop, right? Like, I'm looking at it right now, and I've still not played it either, but it's definitely top of my list to get done, I think.
And so that's on Metacritic just now. Don't be a slave. It's sitting on an 86 on PC, so I think it's also coming to phones, iOS at least. I'm not sure if it's out yet for that. It might be coming later, but it's reviewing well. It's actually been given a perfect 100 by The Guardian, or a perfect 10.
Wow.
Yeah, so they sometimes take a slightly off-kilter approach. But
well, actually, I believe The Guardian's at 5 stars as well, so it's 5 out of 5 stars rather than 10 out of 10, which, I don't know, sometimes skews the review score slightly on Metacritic, But yeah, no, I totally agree. Her Story, really, really want to play it. Really, really excited to play it. I actually kind of forgot this was coming out, or coming out so soon. I knew he was doing another game. Totally forgot about it. It's totally crept up on me. Very much looking forward to playing it.
Good stuff.
All right, we'll go and get some beers, and then we'll be back with our interview with Dr. Pete Etchells. And we are back with Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our interview with Dr. Pete Etchells. And without further ado, here we go.
We are here today at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and I have the great pleasure of speaking to Dr. Pete Etchells, who's been here today discussing his new book, his first book, Lost in a Good Game. Pete is a science writer and professor of psychology, doctor?
I wish I was a professor. Not yet. I'm a reader in psychology and science communication.
At the University of Bath Spa?
Yes.
Bath Spa University. We've got a big gaming community in Bath, I believe, right? There's kind of a history of kind of games writing coming from Bath, I believe.
Yeah, so a lot of games journalists are based in and around the area, and I think Bristol and Bath generally has quite a big indie gaming scene. So yeah, it's a really good place to be.
Good stuff. Perfect to this kind of work. And so before we talk too much about the book, I just want to get a sense of you as a gamer, what gaming means to you. How did you come to involve gaming in your professional life?
Completely accidentally in a way. So I was, I am a psychologist. I need to keep telling myself that. I was doing vision research, though, back in sort of 2010, 2011. So I was doing research on how and why we move our eyes to moving objects, which is not as exciting as it sounds. It was good. No, it was really interesting stuff. And I'm a super nerd, so I really enjoyed it. But around about 2011-ish, I started getting into science writing. And I started trying to think about how to best communicate psychological research to people who might be interested in it. And I kind of got interested in thinking about games research, mostly because around about that time, there was a whole slew of stories in the news. And I realized later on, this actually happens pretty much once every 6 months or so. But around the time, lots of stories in the news around computer games being bad for us in some way. So the one headline that stuck with me throughout my career was one from a newspaper that shall not be named that said, "Computer games leave kids with dementia, warns top neurologist." And I remember when I first saw that headline, I was like, that just doesn't gel well with my experience of games. It doesn't really gel well with my experience of scientific research. Well, let's have a look, see what's going on. There's absolutely no research behind this. It was just mainly a worry. It was a classic sort of worry from somebody who doesn't really know what video games are, seeing people play them. And when you watch people play video games and you don't play them yourself, I get it. It can be quite a jarring experience sometimes. Like somebody's looking at the screen and it looks as though they're completely absorbed in it and they're not caring about anything else and it's melting their brains and stuff. But that seemed a little bit... how shall I be charitable about this? It went a little bit too far, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit too scaremongery for my liking. So I kind of had a bit of a rant about this in the pub one day after work to a professor in my department, and he basically said, "Well, look, Pete, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and do some research on this?" And I was like, "Fine, I will." And that's pretty much how my research career started in it.
Superb. I mean, it's not a million miles away from how this podcast started as well, to be totally honest. I'm quite interested in that idea of those kind of scaremongering stories and the things that people believe. And there was actually a question asked by one of the audience members in your event today, right near the end, from a parent of someone who's starting to play, I think she said Fortnite, and she kind of had that panic because of the way that newspapers are talking about these games. Is that why you wanted to write Lost in a Good Game? How much does that feed into it, that attempt to maybe redress the balance of video games kind of discussion? Yeah,
absolutely. That's one of the main reasons that I did want to write it, really, just because there's so much stuff out there that's really all or nothing in a sense. So it's stuff that says this particular video game is bad, or video games generally are bad in this sort of way, or whenever we see something horrendous happen in society, invariably they get tied to video game use in some way. And then what you tend to see after that is a backlash in a way where people who know something about video games try to balance things out by saying, well, look, no, that's not what video games are. Here are all of the amazing benefits that they have. And there's not really much in the middle of those two, because I think where video games have their effects is really in that grey area between those two extremes. You know, not every video game interaction or experience is a good thing, but that doesn't mean that they're a terrible thing and we should avoid them or ban them or whatever. So it was really trying to think about how we could change the way that we talk about video games and have a little bit more of a nuanced discussion about them and a little bit more of a sensible, level-headed, reasonable argument about them.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems to me that there's quite a lot of categorization errors that take place in kind of video games discussion, and I'm struck even by this idea that we talk a lot about games like Call of Duty or now Fortnite, obviously, or Overwatch, Grand Theft Auto that are the big hitters, but in reality there's so many games in that kind of mid-plane that you're talking about. I'm thinking of games like Papers, Please or Sea of Solitude, which you mentioned earlier, that are doing something a bit different to those games, and yet gamers were maybe too quick to get into those arguments about the bigger titles, the more kind of glitzy titles. Do you think that that's something that we as players and maybe you as scientists should be kind of addressing a bit?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult thing to do because those are the big games. They're the ones that are the best selling ones. So when you look at your average gamer, chances are they're probably going to have played that, even if it's just for a little bit. Yeah. And they're the ones that people know about. But you're right, there's this entire sea of amazing games, loads of indie games out there that try to do really interesting things based on the experiences of the developers behind them, that are really fascinating entertainment experiences, and they're not just your standard first-person shooter. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but games can be so much more than that. And it's difficult to have conversations about their effects and include those sorts of games. Because, by and large, if you look at the psychological research in this area, 90% of it is on things like addiction or whether violent video games cause aggression. So in that second question, for instance, you're always going to be talking about things like Fortnite and Call of Duty. It's kind of the default because those are the games that we think of as quote-unquote violent games. But there's really little research that looks at those other sorts of interesting experiences. And what research is out there on those is really quite cool. It's quite innovative, and I'd like to see more of it, really.
Yeah, is that a route you see yourself going down in future then?
I would like to. I think, I would be brutally honest, probably not, because we get stuck on those questions about the big titles, right? So I think any initial research will invariably end up going down those routes because those are the ones that you think might have the biggest impact. If you can say something meaningful about the effects of Fortnite, Call of Duty or whatever, then people might be able to relate to that a little bit more. But I think there's a whole area of research around trying to understand why people play games, which I talk a little bit about in the book, that could be better and needs to think about those really different types of games and gaming experiences to get the full spectrum of answers to that why question.
While we're on that then, tell me why you play video games and what games do you enjoy playing in particular?
I play different games for different reasons, really. And I think that's where the difficulty in doing the research is, right? Because it's not that you pick a person and they will only play games to socialize with other people and things like that. I really like games that have a really strong narrative. So I bang on about that quite a lot in the book. I like games that are almost like a movie in a sense, that I can be the main character in this amazing story. And it's interesting, I've had arguments with people about this where I've said, for me, a good game is that it's something that has a strong narrative, and they go, well, that's just rubbish. That's not what makes a good game. Look at Minecraft. And I say to them, I'm not saying that objectively that is what makes a good game. It's just my personal experience of it. So there's all other sorts of reasons why people play. So I play Minecraft. I'm not very good at it because I don't think I'm a very creative person. So I remember the first time I played Minecraft, I was like, wow, this is incredible. It's like digital Lego. I can do whatever I want. And then my next thought was, oh my God, I can do whatever I want. And I just sort of sat there for a bit. And it's like, do you know when you're a rubbish artist or you're a kid learning to draw for the first time and somebody says draw a house and you draw something that's got 2 windows downstairs, 2 upstairs and a door in the middle. I basically made that house in Minecraft and it was the most disappointing gaming experience of my life.
A house that no one's ever lived in.
It does not exist anywhere in the world and nobody would want it. I got a little bit better at Minecraft. Well, better. You can't be good at Minecraft. That's one of the good things about it. You can be more creative, but if you make a scale replica of the Starship Enterprise in Minecraft, that doesn't make you a better Minecraft player than my rubbish house. It just means that you use it in a different sort of way. And I enjoyed my time making my rubbish house until I sort of stood back and realised what I'd done. So it's an interesting game in that sort of sense. We try and kind of objectify measures like what makes a good game, and I think that is an interesting question in terms of how certain scientists perceive what games are. You know, some people who do research in terms of things like video game addiction often characterize games as, you know, you play it to score as many points as possible. And that is not my experience of video games, and that's definitely not Minecraft. It's not even really things like Warcraft. Really. Yeah, you can be the person who wants to get the most achievement points, but you're doing so much other stuff in the course of doing that. It's not really about point scoring or getting the most kills and things like that. So that why question, I don't think I did a massively good job of answering it in the book, and partly that's not me being self-deprecating. It's partly because the research just isn't there yet. Just because it's so hard to do this sort of stuff. To, you know, if you play games and you think about why you play a particular game or why you play games generally, there'll be all sorts of different reasons for that, and there'll be different reasons why you play a particular game at different times. And to try and capture that in either a questionnaire or an experimental survey or an experimental study or something like that is remarkably hard, and we're just not quite there yet.
So focusing in then on issues around violence or around addiction, which is kind of topics that we've been speaking about a lot on this podcast, what are the challenges there in terms of research, and should we just discount what we're being told by particularly the tabloid presses about the kind of moral panic around gaming? I'm thinking particularly as well about the recent declarations from President Trump around violence in video games. Is there no basis in any of this? What should we be thinking about?
So the violent video game question, there is zero evidence that links playing video games to mass shootings. There is nothing. It's a non-existent link. There's a slightly more interesting question around whether if you play violent video games, and we can have a debate about what you mean by that, does that make you more aggressive later on? So there's a lot of research out there that says, yes, it does. A lot of it's not very good research for various sorts of reasons. The best research that we have out there suggests that there might be weak links between the two, but really they're nothing to worry about, and they're quite short-lived as well. If you look at it at a societal level, so criminologists who studied generally levels of violence in society and the increasing use of video games, there's a negative correlation. Now, that doesn't mean that violent video game use is causing fewer acts of violence. It might be the case that violence has always been going down anyway. And if video games weren't there, it would have gone down a lot quicker. But the fact that there's a negative correlation there suggests that video games definitely aren't causing these acts of violence. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of research time has been wasted on the violent video game aggression link. You know, to my mind, the good research is already out there, and it suggests that this is not something that we should worry about. And it would be nice, we're not going to be able to, but it would be nice if we could put that question to bed and move on to more interesting questions around how people interact with each other in games, how people find value in socializing and that sort of connectedness. So really kind of nuanced questions that we don't really have a good handle on, even how to test yet, rather than, and we don't even have a really good handle on how to ask the right sorts of questions, really. So, I mean, it's not going to go away because America will always have mass shootings because they have ridiculous gun laws, and it's definitely the guns that causes it, right? This is a no-brainer.
So. Yeah,
this is an absolute no-brainer. It's the only country in the world that has these flexible gun laws in a sense. Every country in the world has video games, and you don't see the same links being made anywhere else.
So some of the questions that you mentioned there as being the more interesting ones, and I totally agree. I think there's some really interesting discussion to be had around socialization, particularly in games. Is that something that we just need to wait for? We were talking recently about the select committee appearance that EA and Epic and others made recently, and it struck me that the politicians in that room did not really have a clue what they were talking about, and maybe that it's just a case of waiting until our kind of generation that is still to kind of take up positions of power in a meaningful sense can start to change those discussions, because we maybe do have a better understanding of these things. Is that naive? Maybe it is.
Maybe I can. There's a strong argument to be made along those sorts of lines. I think you see it in terms of looking at parental attitudes towards video games. So we're starting to see a generation of parents who've grown up playing video games, and there's been some research that shows that if you interrogate their views and attitudes and beliefs about video games, they tend to match the good scientific research a little bit more than people who don't play video games. So people who don't play video games of those sorts of generations tend to overestimate the negative effects, whereas with gamer parents, it's a little bit more balanced. I think, we're seeing these policy issues start to come into play where the government's interrogating, like say, people like EA and Epic. I think the politicians do, for the most part, they do a good job of figuring out what the issues are, and I think they're asking the right sorts of questions. I think there's a debate to be had around how the games industry is interacting with some of these issues as well, and it's something that I need to be careful of sometimes as a scientist, I think, because, I've written a lot of stuff for The Guardian and other places that invariably has been, something that is a moral panic around games comes out in the media, and I write a rebuttal to it. Say, look, this is what the science actually says. We don't want to get into a situation where the games industry says, well, this scientist who knows what they're talking about has said there's nothing to worry about, so we're going to ignore this entire debate. I think that's a really irresponsible approach to take. I think it's a really difficult one because there's some really interesting questions that we can ask around who plays games and who they play them with and how they play them and things like that games developers have the data on. Sony and Microsoft will have that data, but it's near impossible to get it as a scientist because it's all proprietary data and it's all locked behind closed doors. So I think we are coming to a bit of a crunch point now, and there's more of a general discussion around this, around screen time and tech companies more broadly. That's very similar in that you can't have your cake and eat it, right? You can't say, well, the science is rubbish, so we're going to ignore it, and then get upset when regulation comes into force because you've not been willing to be a part of that conversation.
You've not taken responsibility.
Yeah.
And on that point then, obviously that discussion that happened in Parliament recently was all around addiction and microtransactions and this kind of aggressive tactics to get players to spend more money in games. I wonder if you could give your perspective on that. Is that something that that the evidence bears out on? Is there really a problem with gaming addiction?
So things like microtransactions, the research on that is in its very early stages at the minute. So we don't have anything conclusive at all. We just have some really good studies, but they're correlational in nature. So we don't really know what's causing what. So there's some evidence that suggests that there's a correlation between whether or not you pay for loot boxes in games, and that's across a wide spectrum of games. So Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Hearthstone, things like that, and problematic gambling levels. So it's a really nice, elegant study. It's by a guy called David Sendell and colleagues, who basically gave a bunch of gamers a couple of questionnaires. One was a problematic gambling survey. The other was a questionnaire about, do you use games that have loot boxes? If so, which ones? Do you spend money in them? How's the loot box system implemented? Things like that. Basically, what they found is that if you're playing games that have a loot box element implemented where you can pay for it in some way, there's a correlation there. So there's not if it's free, if it's all free. And the strength of that correlation varies based on essentially how gambling-like the loot box system looks. So and how much value there is to it as well. So something like Overwatch, where there's no monetary value attached to the stuff that you can get in loot boxes, shows weaker correlations. Something like Counter-Strike, where you can get in-game items that you can sell on open markets, and some of those things go for like $4,000. You see much stronger correlations. So what does that mean? Well, we don't really know yet. It could be the case that people who are more prone to problematic gambling are also drawn to games that have these sorts of elements in them. It could be that these sorts of elements cause that sort of problematic gambling behavior. Either way, it's not good. It's either effectively acting as a gateway to problematic gambling, or it's the case that these mechanisms are inadvertently or otherwise exploiting potentially vulnerable individuals. So, I mean, I don't see the point in loot boxes from a gaming perspective at all. I get it from a monetary perspective. These are immensely lucrative things to implement in a game, and they're really easy to implement. From a gaming perspective, you take a game, take the loot box system out of it, the game doesn't change. It's still a good or a bad game, whatever it is.
Yeah, and potentially more fun for the player anyway, because they can have the things that they want.
Yeah, and I think there's a really interesting conversation to have around this in terms of mobile games at the minute, because I think a lot of these discussions have been around console and PC-based games and how they implement loot box systems. If you look at like 90% of mobile games, it's like they're just there to make money. You know, they're not really interesting. They're not massively engaging. There's no storyline there, or there's the veneer of a storyline. You know, invariably things like match 3 puzzle games where you can spend endless amounts of money to get extra lives or to get new levels or to stop adverts that are telling you about this new fun and addictive game, to stop those from playing, that really just feel like the money sinks. And I talk about it a little bit in the book. So I kind of got sucked into one of these games a couple of years ago. I was playing, it's called Game of Thrones Conquest.
Oh, yeah.
And I ended up spending like 150 quid on this game in a very short period of time. And it was very unfulfilling in the sense that you don't get anything tangible out it. You kind of put your password in to get some in-game currency, and that in-game currency gets converted into some other sort of in-game currency, which you can then spend effectively in that game on reducing a timer, so making things speed up. And it's a very unfulfilling experience, and I was really upset with myself afterwards. Thankfully, I managed to get the money back because the game was really glitchy at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I just complained and got all my money back. But there was... I remember I can't remember what they're called, the teams or clans that people had set up in there. The one that I was part of, we had a Discord channel that we were chatting to each other outside of the game. And the guy who was like the best player on our server, the highest level player on our server, had got to like the maximum level within like 2 months of the game coming out, which wasn't possible without spending money. Yeah. And it's anecdotal. I've never been able to confirm it properly, but I don't see any reason why they would have had any reason to lie about it. But it was common knowledge on the server that he'd spent over $13,000 on the game to get to that level. Mm-hmm. And apparently the story is that he'd then complained to the developers about the game being glitchy and got the money back and then reinvested a lot of it again. So... So,
do you think that's a sign of addiction, though, to behave in that way?
So this is an interesting question, right? So... if you had a question on a questionnaire that says, you know, how much money have you spent in a game? And it ranges from like £0 to £10,000 or whatever. And there's a cut-off point somewhere. So, you know, if you spent more than £1,000 in a game, then that's your cut-off criteria for addiction. That's a really bad criterion because it depends on your situation, right? And you can make this argument about other things as well, like drugs, right? So if that person who spent $13,000 in the game was a multimillionaire, not a problem.
Drop in the ocean, yeah.
If it was somebody who didn't have a job and was struggling, real problem. So that's why these sorts of things are really difficult to get a handle on, because you can't just look at the in-game behaviours that people are exhibiting. You have to look at the whole picture. You have to look at what else is going on in their lives. And then the question starts to go down, well, is it some of those other things that are the problematic behaviours? And actually what they're doing in a video game is a manifestation of that, and it's not the kind of underlying cause. So there's some emerging research that's coming out at the minute that if you look at people who self-report as addicted to video games, actually it seems to be things like parental influences and academic pressures that drive them to play video games more, and then it becomes an issue. So it's kind of those things that are the causal problem. Those are the things that you would need to do something about, and if you did something about those, then there wouldn't be a problem with the gaming anymore. So the risk is with some of these things, you know, if you say that gaming addiction is a thing and you remove the game, stop people from playing games, it doesn't actually solve the underlying problem that they're suffering from.
Yeah, the thing that's pushing them in that direction. It seems like a really fascinating... is it fair to say it's a seed part that we're at here? Like this is the beginning of research like this? It strikes me that as gaming continues to grow and grow and grow and become this absolute megalithic thing across the world, this sort of research that you're doing is only going to become more and more important.
I think the answer to that is sort of yes and no, in the sense that research on video game addiction, in whatever guise it's been called, has been going on for nearly 40 years now. Yeah. So this isn't new stuff in that sense. I think there's a general problem with doing any sort of research in terms of video game effects, in that science tends to move at a glacial pace, and video games change really quickly. Yeah. So you're always playing catch up in a sense. In terms of the addiction question, I think the best way of characterizing it in terms of where things have maybe gone wrong is the American Psychiatric Association has a diagnostic manual for mental health disorders called the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And when the new version of it came out in 2013, something that they called internet gaming disorder was included in that. But it was included in a special section for things which aren't disorders yet, but we think they need to be researched more.
Keep an eye on this.
And that was a really good thing to do. And the idea behind it was to say, look, this is a thing that's potentially a worry. We don't know what it is or what it looks like at the minute. So if we include it here, hopefully that will push people into doing the right sorts of research. I feel like it backfired a little bit in the sense that what a lot of researchers did after that was to say, okay, internet gaming disorder is a thing now. We can use these criteria and do other things. So you assume that those criteria are correct and then look for populations where they're addicted or not. So it becomes kind of confirmatory in terms of just revalidating these criteria rather than taking a step back and saying, what are the things that we should be worried about in terms of gaming and how can we characterize that in terms of criteria for a mental health disorder? And that's not really happened yet. And I think it would be nice to see that. And, you know, there's been decades of research on video game addiction, and there's countless papers out there that develop new and amazing questionnaires for trying to capture addiction. So the problem then you've got is that, you know, for every new paper that's got a new concept of video game addiction, it becomes harder and harder to compare across them. So the image that you get, the perception that you get from the research literature is that there's all of these papers that say that, you know, if you give people this questionnaire, you can get an idea of whether or not they're addicted to video games. But we don't actually know what a lot of those things are testing. And some of them might actually be testing video game addiction as it actually truly is in the real world. But we can't filter those out from things that have misidentified it as, say, gambling addiction or just high engagement in gaming without any problems. So a lot of it's a real mess in the research literature. And it would be nice if we were just able to take a step back a little bit and say, okay, let's just reset. Let's think about what it is that we're trying to do here and then try and come up with a robust way of testing this.
Well, it sounds like there's still plenty of the map to be uncovered, but it's a really exciting thing to know that that's happening and that maybe down the line we'll have a much clearer sense of some of these issues. Pete, thanks very much. I think that's about all we've got time for, but thanks very much for talking to us today. Tune in to the Players 2 podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
And that was our interview with Pete Etchells. Thanks very much to Pete for being on the podcast. It was really, really great to talk to you. It was really, really enlightening. He was a really, really smart guy, really, really knows his stuff. And I would strongly recommend that if anyone is interested, they go and check out his book.
Yeah, it's called Lost in a Good Game. It's available now everywhere. It's published by Icon Books. And we'll post a link to places that you can buy it on the show notes on players2.com. So yeah, just my own thanks to Pete for talking to us and to the Edinburgh International Book Festival for letting us conduct the interview in their office, which was really good. Thanks everyone.
All right, and just before we go, remember that you can find Players 2 on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, the lot. You can also find our written content over at players2.com. That's playerst.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, it would really, really, really help us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and we would be super, super grateful. And while we're over there, if you can give us a little review as well, again, same thing, it just helps us out so much. It does a huge amount for the exposure. It's all about Apple's crazy algorithm. We don't know how it works, but we know that helps. And I'd just like to remind everyone that our game or play along for this month is Undertale. Mark still hasn't started it. I don't know why he referred to himself in the third person either, but I've still not started it, so we'll definitely have time to play along, because I've got time to play along. Very much looking forward to getting stuck into it. It's definitely going to be this week, if I can pry myself away from Fire Emblem, but we'll see. I'm going to do it.
You better get to it before you get to Control as well.
Oh, Jesus, I forgot about that as well. Oh no, they're piling up, Liz. They're piling up already. All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.